we will look into how public opinion contributed to the mess that Raila had in the recently concluded general election. This is not the first time that Raila is a victim of public opinion, and in the two occasions both have negatively affected them. The public opinion in the recent presidential election was heavily cooked so as to prepare Kenyans psychologically for Raila's win. But you see, Kenya, public opinions don't work the way public opinion work in developed countries. In developed countries, just this week, Israel, there was a public opinion which was forecasting that the long-serving Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, would go back. And truly he came back. Not only did he come back, but he came back in the exact percentage that it happened. In Western countries it works, but in developing countries like Kenya it does not work. When I was working for Special Branch, we used to have public opinion. But you see, and the public opinion in Special Branch, I only remember one in which we failed. But all of them we used to get correctly. Ruth Ambuto nowadays says that public opinion follows a certain scientific method, and all the scientific methods that we saw were skewed to prepare the mentality of Kenyans for a Raila presidency. When I was working for Special Branch, we used to carry out that, and we used to get correctly up to the last percentage. It is only one time when we failed, and that was when Lotoda had been jailed, and William Kanyongo Sindano was selected, not elected, as the MP for Pokot West, which today is called Kacheliba. What happened was, immediately after a magistrate had sworn election officials, they were given ballot papers, and they started marking the ballot papers at Kapenguria. Then when Pokots, who by then were still backward, one would come and he or she would be given a paper and also umekuja kura ingiza kwa hiyo sanduku. That is what contributed. Somebody goes to the polling room, he or she is given a paper, folds it without even looking at it, and then places it in the ballot box which had been pre-marked. Public opinion in Africa or even in developing country can change opinion of people. It can make those who are supporting the leading candidate have confidence, and even some may not even go to a poll because they know already their person has won. And it can also make those who are of a losing candidate have more morale to go and vote. So you may find that even if you have scientifically done proper, the last results may not be exactly that. The reason why Special Branch public opinions were always right is that we never shared publicly. Let's say 2 weeks to election, we could say that so-and-so is leading by so much percentage. So the public would not know it, and it would not be swayed by reasons that I've just said. Another good public opinion which is done in developed countries is that we have something that we call exit poll, where somebody has just voted and you ask, whom did you vote for? Exit poll is more accurate than the opinion poll. One thing that contributes to the poor showing of the Kenyan and other developing countries is that many Kenyans don't want to publicly say whom they are voting for. So when you approach a person and ask, whom would you vote for? He will look at you and form an opinion. Could this person be a leftist or a rightist? If you are a lefty, if he thinks that you are a leftist, he will tell you that I'll vote for the leftist candidate. If he thinks you are a rightist, he will say so. So in developed country, there is always a person either hiding or telling the person what that person wants to, what he thinks that person wants to hear. Another contribution to our negative voting pattern in a developing country, I saw there was a place where we used to meet and talk politics. And coincidentally, one of us was selected by a public opinion company to gather public opinion. So one day he came, he knew the people, he knew us, he knew this one was on the left and he knew this one was on the right. And so he chose people who already, he knew that whenever we had arguments, they would always side with his feelings. So he gave them forms, but when we asked for also forms to give the contrary opinion, he said that we belonged to the tribe of those who had filled in. So he was going to another place around 5 kilometers away to collect views from people from another tribe. But where we were, he had already collected people from one opinion side. I said that Raila has been affected by public opinion twice. The first time was in 2008. Immediately after we had the general elections, they started a public opinion. And I remember connecting some people and telling them that those were cooked, but they could not listen. It so happened that immediately after the Nusumkate government was formed, public opinion started, and they were even placing their Kibaki as number 3 or 4, and Kibaki people complained and said that constitutionally he had already been sworn in twice, so there is no way he could be sworn in again, so his name was removed. But there was a deliberate and cooked up. If you know Raila's supporters don't wave. Core supporters, that is what I mean. But you find that the graph happened that way, that he started from number 3 and slowly started catching up. When he started catching up, it reached a time when there was a Naivasha meeting. During the Naivasha meeting, the PNU wanted a purely presidential system. But Raila's team, ODM, wanted a Westminster parliamentary system. But this thing had been calculated 1 year in advance, such that if you go to a library and start checking newspapers of 2008, you'll find that Raila was gaining regularly at, let's say, 2% per week. So that just before the Naivasha meeting, the public opinion was saying that Raila had 50% of, if elections were held today, Raila would get 50%. That is when lawyers, Kina Orengo, who are close to Raila, came up and convinced him and said he should change his mind from Westminster parliamentary system into presidential, because if elections were held today, they would only fight for 1 vote so that Raila becomes the president for 5 years. But if Raila went ahead and we had a Westminster parliamentary system, every 6 months he was liable to a vote of no confidence. So they convinced him that presidential was okay, so that between that time, between the Naivasha time and the general election 2013, he had only to maintain the 50% plus 1 vote. But if you check with the library of newspapers of that time, you'll find that the standard of that day shows that Raila rushed one morning to Naivasha, caught everybody by surprise, because Raila has an advantage where he says something, his followers don't argue and they just follow immediately. So he rushed to Naivasha, requested, you know what I mean by requested? He requested the ODM team to change their mind and follow the presidential system of government. His team did that, and PNU were caught flat-footed. If PNU would have known that Raila was going for presidential, purely presidential, they would have changed and said that they were going for Westminster parliamentary. But when he caught them unaware, so that is why we had what mostly likely looks like a presidential system. And if you go to the library and start looking at the public opinion immediately after, if you look at the public opinion immediately after the Naivasha thing, Raila started losing public opinion. They were preparing everybody for the mentality that Raila would lose in the 2013 election. They got what they wanted. They gave him that impression that he was winning, so he supported the presidential, and immediately after that they started preparing the country for a non-Raila presidency. So the public opinion, and this one can be checked with the libraries, started showing that Raila was going down. Just before the 2022 election, you'll have noticed that all newspaper, all media houses were pro-government. You'll find that there is the Kitonyi newspaper. Standard belongs to the Moi family. KBCs are national. Let us not talk about royal media. So there was a lot of, they concentrated on the press more than the ground, because they believed that the press would deliver. You may have noticed also that this thing has its counter check. I mean, it brings a problem. When the press cheats, or even if it is telling the truth that your candidate is leading by far, it encourages your supporters not to turn up. After all, why should I go when already my candidate has won? And two, it encourages strong supporters of your opponent to turn up. So that misleading costed him, because many of his people did not turn up. You can even check the percentage in his stronghold. You'll find that it was less. I do not know why the NIS did not use. Okay, you can use the media houses for propaganda and such, but at the same time, simultaneously, you are supposed to use the NIS to properly give the candidate the true picture, so that the whole thing happens. But I can only understand, because Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, during his presidency, he preferred people from the military and the intelligence. So the intelligence started singing, telling him what he wanted to hear more than what he was supposed to hear. I even remember Winnie Odinga were telling the nation that she wonders how or when the deep state or the system moved away from Uhuru to Ruto. This is what happens if you have a boss who does not want to listen to alternative. You just tell him what he wants to hear. Especially the NIS must have concluded that Uhuru's time was coming up, and maybe following him out, they may be sacked before Uhuru leaves the office. And that, to me, is why, one of the reasons. There are various reasons which made Raila lose, but one of the major ones is public opinion. It was so much cooked that he started living in utopia, thinking that would. I even remember there is a party he held where they were drinking alcohol and were saying that it was pre-inaugural party. That is my take on that.